Morning and welcome to Gardening 365 55. And this weekend the weather forecast was to be absolutely gorgeous, so what I've done is come out reasonably early and I'm going to get some water onto the garden. Now I don't particularly like using tap water, but to water all of this with rainwater using watering cans is going to take some time. So the sun isn't quite out yet and I never water in direct sunlight. I decided to come out with the hose pipe just before that sun breaks through properly. And in this week's video you will see planting up some winter veg, which will be really useful. Okay, I'll also be covering some hot composting and also what to do with your weeds, which is something we all need to know about. Okay, hopefully you enjoy this week's video. I'm just planting up some leeks for the winter. Now ideally they could have done with going outside, but unfortunately I've got no room in the garden for them to go in at the minute. So what I'm going to do, until I dig my first potatoes, which is where they'll go, they're just going to go into some intermediate pots. So I've grown them using a scattered method of throwing seeds, an old seed tray. So this side's now just going to put them up, and then, as I say, in a month plant them in the garden and they make a terrific winter vegetable, and possibly used a very small proportion of a packet of seeds and they will give a 20 plus good meals of good fresh veg. Now believe it or not, at times I'm in really bright direct sunlight, so I don't want to water these from the top, so I put them in a little tray so they can pull some water up, which is a really good way of getting water into the plants without sort of damaging them. And next up, the winter veg potting up, and we love this season, purple sprouting. I think there's about 10 or 15 plants there, and that's more than enough for us. We had about 20 plus last year, it was far too many, but we love purple sprouting. And the next for potting up, these are cauliflower, and they are Romesco, I think. And just to finish with, I potted up a few lettuce, only a few, because I've still got some in this other tray that I can pot up at another stage. The thing with lettuce, they grow quite quick, so this is how it works. Lettuce that are ready for eating. Smaller lettuce to take over from the bigger lettuce when the bigger lettuce have been eaten. Lettuce to take over from the ones outside when they've been pulled. And for me, that's the perfect example of succession gardening. So as soon as something's eaten, another plant will be planted to take over to continue on the cycle. So you've got lettuce all the way through the season. Same sort of example here with the carrots, some ready for eating and some to take over when they have all been eaten. Tomatoes that are ready, tomatoes that are considerably smaller without tomatoes on, little tiny tomatoes, and some tomatoes that haven't even been planted yet. So just for you guys that are worried about planting tomatoes, is it too late? I haven't even planted some of mine yet. And later in the video we'll be talking about what you can do with your weeds so you can make them a real benefit to your garden in the future. Yeah, your weeds. So keep watching. A couple of weeks ago you saw me sowing potatoes in the compost heap, and now all I'm doing is just covering them up with a little bit more compost so that they grow through and hopefully grow really strong, healthy potatoes which are going to feed us. That's what it's all about. I'm just currently turning over one of the compost bins, and if you look at this, it looks almost like there's been a fire in here. And there's not been a fire, I can assure you, but there's been something that's been very hot in here. These are the microbes that break down the compost. That's stage 1. At the moment there won't be any worms in here because it's far too hot. As it cools down a little bit, then the worms will come. So what I'm going to do after I've turned the compost over is just put some more grass in it to create even more heat yet again. Now if you've got a good compost heap, the very hottest place of it, as I probably showed you earlier, is right down in the middle of it. And if you've seen previously how hot it gets down there, it'll turn things white. And just weeded that. But I'm going to use the benefit of that hole now to throw the weeds in. And in they go. And now I'll just cover up the compost bin. All covered up now. And looking forward to knowing that those weeds have just roasted in there. And then they can be used next year for fertilising the garden, knowing that none of them are going to grow back. How to get rid of your weeds. And to really get the compost going, a couple of cans of water on it. Moisture encourages the compost process. So I'll put a couple of cans of water on it, cover it up and start the roasting process. And now covered up with an old carpet and a couple of blocks to keep everything in place. And then what I'm going to do is some of my plants that need to stay out, I'll just put them on top of there. And my potatoes that I covered up before, I'll put a couple of cans of water on them as well now. And we'll watch the progress, because I think maybe midweek, certainly by this time next week, we'll see potatoes again. And for you regular watchers, you haven't seen the finished IBC yet. So it's now clad in wood. And I've got water down here at the greenhouse, which is absolutely brilliant. Here's our new idea for what to do with the grass. I'm not saying it's for everyone. What we're doing is just cutting pathways through the grass. Sorry you can see my shadow. This way. And then leave anything that grows wild untouched. And we'll let this go for a month or two, just as it is. And we'll see how it develops. And we're loving it. This is about a month in. This is what your lawn would look like if you didn't mow it for a month. And then in a month's time maybe we'll mow it, or maybe we'll let it grow for another month or so. A couple of months. And we've got another area right over the back there that we're trying it with as well. New ideas for your lawns. If you've got a big enough garden, you might not want to do that if you've got a small area. And what results can you get? Little things like this just pop up everywhere. And it's just absolutely beautiful to see. Why buy flowers when you can have this free of charge? And we really are hoping to get that very final section of greenhouse finished soon. The glass on the roof, but there's no sides on it at the minute, and the worry is if we get any heavy winds. So the sooner the better for me. And this is one of the gardener's greatest pleasures. I'm just about to pick my first tomatoes of the year. And there it is, my first tomato harvest of the year. Wow. Perfect. Well, all good things must come to an end. And unfortunately, that's pretty much the end of my weekend. And for you guys, pretty much the end of the video. But what I will say, every video is totally different. So please, if you're watching, don't think every video is going to be the same, because every week I try to cover a different topic. And unless you watch every week, you're not going to see all of those different topics that I'm covering. And what I'm trying to do is to cover everything during the 365 days of the year. And the only way you're really going to do that is to watch every video. And the best way to do that, especially if you're watching on YouTube, is hit that subscribe button, and every week you'll see the new video, which will be absolutely great. So if you're watching on Facebook, again, go to YouTube, subscribe, you'll see next week's video, as simple as that. So thanks very much for watching, and that concludes this episode of Gardening 365. Gardening 36555. Join me for next week's episode, which is my birth age, which is Gardening 36556. So thanks again for watching, and see you next week. Bye. Oh, and by the way, we're enjoying the rest of the evening with another wood-fired barbecue. Delicious.